Good evening, everyone. You're watching Vintage Motocross Q&A. I'm Joe Abadi. In just a minute, my guest tonight, Bill Liles, will be on. Before we do that, I want to thank the people that help make this show possible, our sponsors. Of course, Vinco, Motion Pro, Full Circle Racing, Replica Motorcycle Parts. Got a lot of great products coming out. We'll talk about them a little bit later on in the show. The International Motocross Museum, Racer X, and Preston Petty Products. We will be right back with Billy Liles. Good evening, everyone. It's Joe Abadi. You're watching Vintage Motocross Q&A. Please keep sharing the show, whether you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube. Come back to Vintage Motocross Q&A to the website or our Facebook page tomorrow. We'll have a random share giveaway winner. You'll win some stickers, maybe some magazines. We always give away good prizes here at Vintage Motocross Q&A. My guest tonight hails from the great state of Georgia. During the 1970s, he competed in flat track road racing before finding his home, I guess we could say, in motocross. He raced GPs for 8 seasons. He took 6 overall Grand Prix throughout that time. He also was on the Motocross the Nations team in 1992, I think it was. We'll find out. My guest is Billy the Bullet Liles. Billy, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Hey, Bill, was it 1992 or 94 with you, Emig, and Laraco on the Nations team?
1992, and I rode Hondas that year.
Yeah, most of your career was on Cowie, but you do have a few Honda years there. Was there a KTM period too?
No, I actually worked here in the United States for a KTM dealership, and I did ride a KTM here as I was older in the age classes and club racing.
Okay. Yeah, I just, there's a lot of pictures of you out there, mostly the Cowies, the Hondas, but I did catch a KTM picture, and I was wondering a little bit about that. Bill, tell me about, early on you were a flat tracker and a road racer, but what age did that happen? And walk us through that early period of your racing career.
I actually got my first motorcycle in 1968, a Yamaha JT1 Mini Enduro.
Mm-hmm.
Locally, we had a short track about 10 minutes from the house, and I started racing, the 60 on the short track and the motocross track they had there, and just went from there. I mean, my dad owned a Yamaha shop in Atlanta, and we were one of the larger dealerships at the time. And the racetrack was 20 minutes from the house. So we were racing short track every Saturday night, motocross on Sunday. As I got a little older, 13, 14 years old, we, being one of the top Yamaha dealerships in the U.S., my dad had 2 TA 125 Yamaha road racing bikes.
Okay.
And early in my career, I mean, we had to put foam between the tank and seat because if I slid back, I couldn't touch the handlebars. But I rode 2 races at a huge track in Road Atlanta, Georgia. One at Atlanta International Speedway, and running the top 3 in all of my road races. And I did 1 year amateur at Daytona as well on just the infield.
Right.
Had a good year there. I seized in practice and fell off at about 90 miles an hour, totaled the bike up. Dale Singleton was one of the only privateers to ever win the Daytona 200 with Yamaha. So Dad took the bike to the garage back there, and they fixed it all up. I made the race, and my road races at Road Atlanta, the 2 years I rode, I was top 3. Daytona, I think I ran 6th. And on one of those occasions at Atlanta International, I road raced with Freddie Spencer in his early years when he was on a 125 Honda through the WERA Road Racing Association,
Yeah.
because I was too young to do anything really AMA.
Yeah, that was really part of my next question was were you inspired to be a motorcycle racer or ride motorcycles? Obviously, because your dad owned a shop. And just exactly how old were you when you were racing that TA?
Gosh, motorcycle, like I said, I got it in 68. I was always competitive, youth football, baseball. They started with the mini cycle classes, and it was an every Saturday night, Sunday deal, through the year. Just progressed into doing a lot of short track racing, the odd road race. I mean, I only road raced about 7 times in my life, but, they were good experiences, and I did well at it, but it really, I guess, helped me overall, with motocross, road racing, the dirt track. Just growing up, I mean, that's what kept me out of trouble. I got out of school, I'd ride around the house Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I mean, we were racing Friday night in North Carolina, Saturday night in North Carolina, short track, and Sunday back in North Georgia riding motocross,
Wow. So
just all the time.
Your family was obviously behind you with that. Was that your mom and your dad? And was your dad, I mean, in that shop all weekend then supporting you on the weekends?
Oh yeah. He he owned it. He was part of it, a great mechanic, good with the sales, good with people.
Yeah.
And again, it all started with Yamaha.
Yeah. Bill, you mentioned something just a short time ago to where you said when you came home, it was all about motorcycles after school and things like that. But were there chores for you around there? Did you live on a farm? What was life like for you as a young racer? It had to be some responsibilities as well.
Absolutely. Well, number one priority was to do well in school, have good grades, be respectful. I maintained the yard around the house, took care of the pets we had. These were my chores to do during the week. And, as well as doing well in school. And, even a lot of the seasons when I played youth football, we would practice 2 nights a week and had games on Saturday. Saturday night, we were back at the short track. Just a busy life. I mean, it really kept me out of a lot of trouble. I mean, because I wanted to race, and that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Was there anybody else in your family that was a racer? Did you have any brothers or cousins or anybody that was along that ride with you?
No, my dad, he was, a retired Marine, had gotten into the motorcycle business. At one time was part of 3 dealerships in the Atlanta area. And it was just always a part of my life. I mean, when the motorcycles became available for us to ride, I had one instantly and went from riding to racing, and just became a huge part of my life,
What was the name of your dad's shop and how long did it stay in business for, Bill?
Yamaha of Atlanta was the main shop, and they were in business when Yamaha opened up their corporate in California. They were a dealership before, but it was more like through a distributor. And then when Yamaha came on board, they were an instant Yamaha shop, which I want to say went through, the 70s, the whole decade, 1970 to around 1984, I think, is when he finally sold it. But I had already joined Kawasaki, and my dad wore Kawasaki T-shirts to his Yamaha dealership.
Yeah, well, you know what? I just got to mention a sponsor, then we'll get back to that Kawasaki story. I want to thank Thomas Callister from Full Circle Racing. He still has a special going on for these rims, 18, 19, and 21 inch. He'll lace him, he'll trim him. He's got spokes, nipples, everything you need from Tom McAllister at Full Circle Racing. In fact, he's still running a little special for these CZ rear backing plates, just $179. Full Circle Racing and Tom McAllister. My guest tonight is Billy Liles. Bill, we were just talking about the Kawasaki deal where your dad wore a Kawasaki shirt to a Yamaha dealership. You were the first kid signed up for the Yamaha team, the Kawasaki Team Green program, weren't you?
That would be correct. In 1979, I won a bunch of races at Ponca City, which was national NMA.
Right.
And they were more West Coast than East Coast. And, AMA, we had a lot of AMA, but not NMA. And I went my first year to Ponca City, won 2 classes, had a second and a third in the other 2. I rode 4. And instantly after that, Team Green was starting up. Dave Jordan contacted myself and my dad. And that particular year, Yamaha was giving away support rides for class winners. Well, I won 2 classes. My dad being a Yamaha dealer, they said, well, we're only going to give you 1 bike. Kawasaki stepped in and offered me 4 125s, 4 250s, 2 500s, unlimited parts and expenses to the nationals. And from there, Jimmy Weinert had started back in 79 when they came back into motocross.
Right.
And, it was an entry effort, but they wanted to build, product, revenue, popularity. And they actually hired myself and another fellow, Georgia and Keith Turpin.
Sure.
And we went from there.
Who's in this? Turpin's not in this picture, is he? I don't think so.
No, that's Goat Brecker, number 19, Jeff Ward, number 4, Kent Howerton, and myself, number 12.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I didn't mean to interrupt your story, Bill. Sorry.
No, you're fine. And like I said, in 1977, I won amateur short track championships. Popular riders Chris Carr and Scotty Parker were riding the amateur nationals that year. And I raced against Chris Carr in the 80cc class, which I was top 4 or 5 in it. I blew up my other class on the mini night, but on the big bike night, I won the 125 and 250 class, and I outrun Scotty Parker that year at the amateur national short tracks.
So,
bits and pieces, but Scotty and Chris were such great Harley riders, and I've been once or twice to the Sacramento National, and one of the first people I run into was Chris Carr. Just good memories, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, your career spanned professionally nearly 10 years, and I'm sure you met and made a lot of friends along the way. In 1983, you were Rookie of the Year after that Ponca City race, weren't you, when Kawasaki gave you all those bikes?
82, I rode the production bikes until Tommy Benolkin got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And I inherited the ride the rest of that year. And then 83 was my first full year with the factory team.
Okay. And it's just amazing how far you traveled and how many different things you did. And your dad was there, and and when you think about going to Europe, well, we'll get into that we'll get into that right about now. I guess it was 1987. You wanted to go to Europe to race. What was your inspiration for that? You were making a mark here in America. You were winning some races. You had Kawasaki behind you. To decide that you're going to go to Europe, that's a pretty bold move for a young guy who's really only on the circuit 3 or 4 years. Well,
Kawasaki was really behind me, 82, 3, 4. In 1985, I'd gotten hurt that year, so I rode a lot of the year hurt. But I had a decent year. But in 1986, Lachine we were all going to Japan. I guess it would have been 80, 85. And he had some issues, and Honda terminated his contract.
Yeah.
And Roy Turner, the team manager, he was never a big fan of me. I mean, he was a nice guy, but he was all Southern California oriented, and they offered to sit me down in 1986 and wanted him to ride as in my place on the team.
Wanted Ronnie to ride the machine?
Yep. And, Honda just terminated his contract, and really that was probably his only option.
Right.
I thought about it long and hard, and I negotiated a complete buyout of my contract with the stipulation that they would provide me with the works suspension. And I went to work with Mitch Payton and building engines and things like that, using the factory suspension. And basically it was like being an owner operator in NASCAR. I mean, I had their product and some of their support, but we had a good season. I think I was 5th in the 500 class, 6th in the 250, and 10th or 12th in Supercross. Was a good year, considering, Cowie had 4 factory riders, Honda had 5, Suzuki had 3, and Yamaha had another 3 or 4. So I run kind of middle of the pack, of the factory riders. And it really taught me a lot about managing my money, traveling, working with, what you had to work with. And it led me to Europe.
And I think you're making it sound, well, maybe you're not. I was going to say, maybe you're making it sound a little easier or a little lighter than it actually was, Bill, because you had to make your own arrangements to get to Europe, find a place to live, manage your money, have a place to work on bikes. I mean, it couldn't have been that easy.
Well, I was offered to go over for an international race. And of course, they had Dave Thorpe, Kurt Nickel, Eric Gabors.
Yeah.
It was a big international race, and I showed up, I took my own front forks, my shock, and an exhaust pipe. And the Italian importer showed up with a factory Kawasaki. And I said, I don't want to ride that bike. I want you to get me a brand new production bike out of a crate. So they drove all the way back, about 2 hours back to the factory, and brought me a bike and a crate out. And they're like, what are you going to do with this? And I said,
right,
just move on. My mechanic and I have got this. Let us put it together. We built a bike out of the crate. We put our own carburetor on it, exhaust pipe, suspension. And I went out and run second that weekend in Italy against, a couple of factory Hondas of Thorpe and Gabors, Kurt Nickel. I mean, I had a great showing.
Didn't you have Joe Bay? Was Joe Bay there too?
Yeah, I'm sure they were all there. I just remember, Gabors, Joe Bay, Thorpe, Nickel. I mean, they had all had great seasons. And I showed up, and I think I run second that day. I led some of both motos. And the Italian importer was there. And, I was due to fly back out Monday, and he said, would you mind? He said, I'll take care of changing your ticket. I'll pay you whatever. He said, but will you come spend a week with me at my facility? And I went down. We started talking together with M. Robert, the Italian clothing company. They offered me a 2-year contract to stay there in Italy and compete in the 500 Grand Prix.
With your Kawasaki, your production Kawasaki, who was your mechanic there at that time?
I took, on the way over, I took my mechanic that I had here in the U.S., Bob Pearson, and we were involved in a bad car accident, and he actually passed away. And, in that time. And so when I went over, I took Rick Sparling over, which was an ex-Suzuki mechanic. And I don't know he didn't fit in with the Italians and things like that. So I was pretty much had an Italian just standing in for the first couple of races. And when we went to Finland, I met a Finnish kid named Ari Skog, and he came on board and worked for me the rest of the year in 87, 88, 89. And he went on to work with Joe Bay and Gabors and all of them as well. But he was a super guy, a Finnish guy. And, you know, he was a hard worker and very knowledgeable.
Bill, we're going to take a little break to hear from one of our sponsors. We'll be right back with more from Billy Liles. Sure to visit the International Motocross Museum on Facebook and Instagram. Go over to internationalmotocrossmuseum.org. They got a lot of great swag over there, hats, shirts, all types of things. And it is a 501(c) not-for-profit organization. So all your purchases and donations are tax deductible. My guest tonight is Bill Liles. We're talking about his time in Italy with Kawasaki and some things about his mechanics. And did you sign the contract to stay there for 2 years with Kawasaki, Bill?
I did. It was through the Italian importer, but It was, you know, indirect support through Kawasaki again. And, you know, I was in contact with Mitch Payton quite a bit at Pro Circuit, you know, and he was helping out with a little information and some of the parts and stuff like that. Went on that year to win the Italian national championship. You know, so it was a successful year and really taught me the ropes. I think that year I was 10th in the GP standings, but it's hard to believe when you go on a trip and you're going to go through 3 countries, you need 3 different currencies of money. You need to speak a little bit of a lot of languages for directions.
Yeah.
I mean, I speak fluent Italian. I learned broken French, Dutch, or German. And direction-wise, you know, I knew kilometers, left, right, you know, details to find your way to where you needed to go.
You're fluent in Italian, Bill?
Parlo molto bene italiano, e tu? It's just something where I lived, I had to pick it up. Or, you know, I mean, some of the people spoke English, but mostly, you know, I lived in a smaller town, and they're just, you know, it was either learn it or give up and go home.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always a big sacrifice, especially at that point where there was the currency was all different. There wasn't any such thing as the euro yet. And it would be quite challenging. I've discussed it many times with Brad Lackey, of course, and with Danny Laporte a bit too. But you're the only other guy that I knew that had gone there and was able to say it was a little difficult and it was quite challenging. You did, you know, wasn't Travis Parker over there with you for a while?
He actually went over and showed up, you know, and when he did, he had no place to live, you know, and so I put him up in my apartment. One of the guys at the office I was at went on to help him, and he went to KTM. I mean, he had a great career over there. But in the beginning, it was rough going. I mean, he was just there, nowhere to go, kind of like a gypsy, you know. And I had met him late in the year of 1986, and he needed a ride to the West Coast to finish out the Nationals. So I put him in my truck since I was owning and operating my situation at the time. And we actually became good friends and spent, my first year over there, he pretty much lived with me. And, he clawed his way up. I mean, he really didn't
Yeah.
have a whole lot at the time, and he earned every bit of it.
You were based in Italy, Bill? Where exactly in Italy? Or was it Belgium?
Well, my first 2 years, I was with the Italian importer, and we were
Yeah.
about 2 hours west of Milan near Venice, and
Okay.
a small town, but, it was where the Kawasaki racing team had their operation. Also the home of M. Robert clothing and Clover and stuff like that. So they were huge in the market, over there at the time. And it was just a great place to be.
Who's in this picture here with you, Bill?
Marnique Bervuits, Belgian rider.
Right. Now you're both wearing that Johnson jersey that seemed to be a staple in your gear throughout most of your career. Who was Johnson, and what was your relationship like with him?
Johnson was a Belgian tobacco company, and that was in
Okay.
the era they were pulling tobacco from the markets. And Johnson was able to do it and compete, with just the name Johnson. And they didn't really relate it to cigarettes or anything like that. So we got away for a few years.
Yeah, I personally, I thought it was an American brand for some reason, and I didn't think it had anything to do with the tobacco industry. In 1988, you had your first GP win there, and I think you finished 8th in the world. Where were your wins? What do you remember about some of your GP wins there, Bill?
Wow. In 1988, we were in San Marino, which is like a good southern clay hardcore motocross track.
Yeah.
Just one of those days I was able to put together good starts, consistent. Um, and, it was kind of a track like home, and I had a really good outing and just blessed to have competed. And literally we were a complete private production bike by trade. And to be able to compete with the factory Hondas, the Yamahas, it was great.
Yeah. So, and I guess you've got some trophies from all those wins. And unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of it, and I didn't ask you about wanting, about showing them. But it's not something that you often see in America. As an American rider, there's only a handful of you that really have ever done that.
Yeah, but again, I think a lot of it is the difficult association with traveling languages.
Yeah.
In my instance, I didn't have, someone leading me around. I mean, we were told, hey, we're racing here, given a map, get there, figure it out, but I'm stubborn. I'm, good old country boy. I can find my way around. And we did well. I mean, after the first season, that was a learning experience. From then on, with the addition of Ari, my Finnish mechanic, who was versed in the travel and what we needed to do. I mean, they made it easy on me.
Yeah. Well, it's nice that you can say they made it easy on you, because it certainly isn't an easy task. That's sure. Motion Pro, one of our favorite sponsors, has a 20% off special on everything across the board at Motion Pro except custom cables. When you go to Motion Pro and you check out, put in the code MP9135, MP9135. Get yourself 20% off everything at Motion Pro. Bill, everybody's got their favorite tracks and tracks that they don't like very much. What are some of your favorites? What are some of the tracks you didn't like?
Oh gosh. I guess my favorite track would have been Hawkstone Park in England.
Okay.
Just it had uphills, downhills. It was sandy, rough, and I like the hard tracks in Italy as well. But and the oddity of all of this was, being from Georgia, I won my first national. My first national moto, of course, in Gainesville, Florida, but my first national was one at Lake Whitney, Texas, in the sand.
Okay. Yeah.
And in Volkenswart, Holland, which was full of sand. I mean, it was like Cocoa Beach in Florida. I mean, I won there, 2 years in a row. Hawkstone Park was sandy and rough. I won a lot of my GPs in a terrain that I wasn't really expected to do very well in.
Yeah. Bill, your career, just the way it went, there was an overlap there between works bikes in America and then going to production bikes. But yet, when you went to Italy, you actually preferred a production bike with works suspension. Tell me about, well, it's kind of a two-part question. Did going from the factory bikes to production bikes hurt or hinder you, or didn't it matter at all? And let's talk about a little bit about the feedback that you had to give the factories for them to put that into their plan the next year for the production bikes.
Well, we tried different offsets of clamps, different steering head angles. I guess different motor modifications, things like that. And I was kind of average height, average build, but I liked a really stiff suspension and stuff like that. But I guess my feedback was, I liked everything to be reachable, controllable, rather than being stretched out at all ends. And I don't know, I had a good feel for what I liked and what I wanted in a motor. And I think that was learned from dirt track racing, the smoothness of the delivery, different things like that.
Sure.
And it played a big part, I think, in a lot of my success.
Did you ever have any difficulty with the factories in a sense of you wanting them to do something and them not wanting to do it?
In the U.S., I mean, working with Tom Morgan, we always had a top bike, no matter what. We were able to wrangle and get what we needed to make it comfortable for me to perform in what I liked. In Europe, being as pretty much, I mean, the sponsors, everything was paid to me as an owner, and I operated out of that. But I had a good mechanic in a Belgian who was also an engineer that we made a lot of modifications of our own, crankshaft modifications, different things, and put together some really competitive production bike. In 1989 and 90, I rode production bikes. In 91, I got the factory perimeter frame Kawasaki, which it was a good bike, but it was early in its day.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of work to be developed and done on it.
Mm-hmm.
So one season just wasn't enough.
What would you say was your favorite bike throughout your career?
I actually would have said I had two. My 1990 production Kawasaki that Johan Leite, my Belgian mechanic, and I put together. That's the year that I broke my leg leading the world championship, but that was a full production bike, and we were dominating, And then I guess the 1992 season on the Honda was really special. I mean, that bike would do anything you wanted to it, wanted it to do.
Yeah.
The biggest thing there was with Honda being involved, we had, so many different choices of crankshafts, pistons, suspension, offset, seat heights, pegs. It gave you a lot of things to make yourself comfortable.
Right. So, but when you went to Europe, though, You could have had a works bike in Europe. There was no production rule there.
No, but just the way things worked out. I mean, I was comfortable and confident in what I liked. It was just a matter of having the facility to make it, and of course, my Belgian mechanic was also a machinist. So, I mean, we made our own triple clamps. We made everything. And, once you kind of had your setting and what you liked, it was just a matter of making sure we had enough to get us through the season.
Sure. Bill, we're going to take a short commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a hot topic right now in the world. We just had our choice to put some riders together for the Motocross the Nations. You were on a winning Motocross the Nations team. So when we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay?
Will do.
Vinco, who already has a full line of vintage parts, now has air shocks that are an exact duplicate of the original air shocks so popular in the late 70s. So whether you're looking to build a full racer or museum showpiece, these shocks will give you that incredible 70s look and improve your bike's performance. These new air shocks are fully rebuildable with Vinco rebuild kits, and all shocks are hand assembled in the USA with all new components. Every component is brand new. Just like the originals, our air shocks are adjustable with 2 chambers, high and low pressure, giving you tremendous flexibility for settings of your bike suspension. The Vinco air shocks come fully assembled and ready for installation. Just add air or nitrogen. The kits include the manual and spacers. Visit Vinco.com to check out the air shocks and all that Vinco has to offer to help you get back on track and to keep that ride going.
Special from Vinco is a rod kit for you Suzuki guys, just $139.95. The rod kit is for 76 through 81 TM and RM from 75 to 125 cc's. That's $139.95. Vinco, keep the ride going. My guest tonight is Billy Liles. Billy, you there, Bill?
I'm here, brother.
All right. I thought you had to make a little adjustment there, but it's looking okay now. We just put together, well, not we, you and I, but Roger DeCoster and the powers that be just put together a team for the Motocross of Nations, as they call it now, back in 1992, I think it was. You were on a Motocross the Nations team with Mike LaRocco and Jeff Emig. Tell us about how that team came to be, who called you up, how'd you put it all together? You won, it was in Australia, but there's a whole lot more that goes along with that story, I'm sure. How'd it go, Bill?
Oh, wow. I was contacted that year by Roy Jansen, and originally the talk was myself, Bobby Moore, and Donnie Schmidt.
Right.
As that conversation got deeper, Jody Weissel and some of the press got a hold of it and really pretty much badmouthed us and called us a second-rate team. And at the last minute, of course, Bobby Moore backed out, and Donnie Schmidt both said, we're not going to be a part of this, and they're not really supporting us. And I got a call from Roy Jansen, and he said, look, you're my 500 guy. He said, are you still going? And I said, who am I going with? And he said, I'm working on that right now. He said, what do you think about Mike LaRocco and Jeff Emig? I said, if they're going, I said, count me in.
Okay.
They had great seasons that year. Like I said, I knew of them. I mean, we weren't, I guess, best mates, but, I followed their careers, and they had great seasons. And, I would just hope that they had the confidence that I had in them, in me.
Yeah.
And it worked out really good.
You guys obviously won. It was in Australia. You rode the 500s. What was it? Was it 125, 250, 500 at that point?
Sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So Emig was on a 125?
Yep, that's correct.
And LaRocco on the 250?
Correct. And in that season, I mean, I know they tallied the points a little differently, but we had gate picks. And when you went to the gate, gate one, if you picked one, that's where you started. And we had a great gate pick. bad one out in left field. And I went to both of them and said, look, you guys are on the smaller bikes. You start, it was 10 foot shorter to the first corner from the inside.
Yeah.
And I said, you guys start here. I'm going to start out in left field. I said, we all got together and, I knew, because I had been there all year, I knew who their competition was going to be. And we talked a little bit and I said, we're in the sand. These guys are good. These are the guys you need to watch. I said, we got to remember, we don't have to win every moto of every event. We just have to come out consistent and have the lowest score at the end of the day. And we all worked well together. And again, it was the weekend of a lifetime.
Yeah, and that was in Australia. I mean, did you race there before or after that, Bill?
No, we flew into Perth and we wound up out in the outback. I mean, they had kangaroo bouncing across the roads like we have deer running across the road here in the South.
Bill, I was just there in August. It's still like that. It's still like that.
It was a beautiful place.
It is
beautiful.
It really, really is. Bill, let's talk about some of the sponsors that stood by you throughout your career. I mean, there's a really great picture. I love this picture, Bill. Come on, look at you. You're a stud.
Yeah, that was the year when I got into the riff with Kawasaki and Greg Prim, come up with their gear and kind of helped me put together where I could finish out the 86 season.
Right.
Good fashion, good equipment. Bill Buttram and Greg Prim really, helped me out that year. And again, that year pretty much led to where, I went to Europe.
You finished up in 1994, and I think you started an import business, Bill. What were you importing, and how'd that all come about?
Well, I had done some work with M. Robert, and we were going to try to get him here into the U.S., and it was a great line of clothing. I even took some of my contract in payment with gear to get it going. We just never really got it up to where it needed to be. I mean, Italians had a famous word called domani, which means tomorrow. And
tomorrow.
They were always, behind on schedule, behind this, behind that. But, like I said, I mean, I managed to get through a year of it and it really didn't work out very well. It wasn't a good effort at the time,
Okay. You also spent some time with another company. Now, I don't know if you worked there or what your relationship was with them. It was Pro Gold Lubricants.
Oh yeah, he was another Georgia boy, and had developed a oil, basically a chain oil, like a penetrating lubricant.
Yeah.
But it was modified so that it would adhere to the chain. And after you sprayed it on and soaked it good, it actually dried and it would wear off, but it wouldn't collect dirt, sticky mud, or anything like that. It was kind of like a Pam cooking spray. It wouldn't let anything stick to the chain. Spent quite a bit of time working with him, developing it, and then spent a year or two traveling the country with Parts Unlimited and their representatives promoting the oil. And eventually my understanding was that he was bought out, and that is now a property of what at that time was Parts Unlimited.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering what that was about, and was never really sure. I've got to mention another sponsor of ours, ReplicaMotorcycleParts.com, Paul Parkinson Sr. He's replicating things for all types of motorcycles, Yamahas, Kawasaki's, and Hondas. As you can see here, he has air boxes. He has all sorts of rubber products, from air boots to chain buffers and all kinds of things like that. One of the most important things that I found out today about Replica Motorcycle Parts is, and I don't even have a picture of it yet, but everybody wants them. He'll be making silencers for the 1973-1974 Honda CR250, a difficult, if not impossible part to find for your Hondas. ReplicaMotorcycleParts.com is going to have them coming out very, very shortly. You retired in '94 from racing, Bill, but you still dabbled in racing bikes and including some vintage stuff up until '08. Talk to us about your career after being a pro and some of the times and you had racing bikes after that.
Well, when I got home, Jeff Cernick out of Pennsylvania contacted me with riding Suzuki's. They had a great contingency program, etc. Locally, I was riding 3 classes at the time, 250 Pro, plus 25 and plus 30, the age classes. They paid great contingency. They sponsored me through bikes and parts, and then I was available for the contingency. And when I came home, I really didn't have a job. I mean, I was still racing on the weekends, doing a lot of camps and schools with kids. And in that time, working with Pro Gold as well. And, it was nice to stay involved with what I've done most of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was your life from when you were a little guy in your dad's shop. And it just kind of went on from there, which I guess really, and I've got a few other questions here for you too, but what did you do after that? I mean, what do you do today, Bill, to keep yourself busy?
Well, I rode through, I think, 2007, 2008, and totally got away from motorcycles. One, my wife, Donna, was a little worried. I'm getting older.
Sure.
I'm going to, and at the time, I mean, I was managing a service department for Sears Automotive here in Asheville, North Carolina, racing on the weekends, and still managing the service department for a local auto repair shop. We have like a 6-bay garage. We do mechanical repairs on cars, tires, brakes, air conditioning, head gaskets, pretty much all around repair shop. And a buddy of mine, which I'd like to shout out to Tommy McCullough, Dan Costner, Kelly Fouch, FX Gear, for all getting involved and helping me. Dan showed up with a brand new Kawasaki 450 SXR about 3 months ago. I've been out to a couple of events. Haven't ridden in 5 or 6 years, but I thought I'd jump right back on. First weekend out, I dislocated my shoulder. But since then, I've gotten wise and thought we're going to slow down, get in a little better shape. And I've done a couple of vintage events with the modern equipment, had some good weekends, and building back. Some of my old riding buddies, Kelly Fouch, they're putting together an event, the 29th, 30th, 31st, like a 3-race event in my honor around the Georgia area.
What I'm going to do, Bill, I just saw that today, and I didn't have it in my pictures yet. I will put that up on the Vintage Motocross Q&A page, and I will also make sure you get some exposure for that right up until that event actually happens, okay? I don't have a picture of it here, but we'll make sure we get something out there for you, okay? Here's a picture. I'm sorry. Go ahead, and I'll put this picture up after that. Go ahead. You were saying?
It's just an honor that, again, Kelly, I grew up racing with, Ben Bishop, a bunch of them, and for them to offer to put an event on in my honor, a bunch of people are jumping on board and getting involved. And again, we hope to make it an annual event every year. And again, it's just an honor to me to be involved with such good friends and people to step up and do something like that. I mean, I'm just a good old country boy.
Well, those are the guys that people like, Bill. You know,
Well,
as I was just saying a moment ago, I mean, I know you were still racing in 2004. I took this picture. That's why I'm not in it. Here you are on the right, and these are my friends Jerry Cantone and Rich Vasallo. You came out for a Legends race, and Gary Jones was there, Mike Bell. We had one hell of a nice time having you up there in Southwick. So I know you were still throwing a leg over a bike and going pretty good in 2004.
oh yeah, I was still riding every weekend racing. And like I said, it just started getting hard to work, a 60-hour work week, travel late Saturday night, get to a track, ride on Sunday. And I was
Right.
just at a point that it was time to take a break. And like I said, Dan showing back up with this brand new Cowie, putting me back in touch with Mitch Payton and a bunch of the people. We're just starting to get the wheel rolling, but as I said, I just turned 60 years old this week, and going to start getting back out regularly on the weekends at some vintage and regular events. And again, starting to put together some more schools and classes and things like that.
Right.
And hopefully, good Lord willing, it can promote into doing some good camps and hopefully helping with some up and coming riders.
Yeah, and you know what, Bill, we're taking some time here to do this interview, but as that race gets a little bit closer or you have other events coming on, we could always make a little short 10, 15-minute thing where you can plug the event, and we'll keep getting the word out there for you every chance we get. Supercross and motocross, do you follow them yet? Watch them on TV? You like what's going on?
Somewhat, yeah. I mean, I've been trying to get back to the Atlanta Supercross every year. I run into Brock Glover last year down there. I've got a good friend that works with the Star Yamaha setup, and he keeps me informed. I mean, he flies out and just helps on the weekend, but he was one of the guys in my early career that he worked for UPS, but he trained with me every day. He rode with me. Basically, and he looked after my house
While you were gone.
That's it. He took care of my place, and again, we're still good friends and talk quite a bit.
Hey, Bill, yeah, a question came to mind just now when we were talking. You had a long relationship with Kawasaki, a little bit with Honda. What happened with KTM, and if anything, and were you ever offered a contract during those very successful Kawasaki years that you turned down? Or let's talk about that.
Wow. In 1984, I mean, 83, 84 were really good years for me. In 1985, I was offered a deal through Suzuki. And when I called them to turn it down, they said, "Is money an issue?" And I said, "No, it's not about the money. It's about loyalty."
Oh,
It was more money, but remember, Suzuki was pulling out of the 500 class.
yes.
So it would have only been a Supercross and 250 a year. And at the time, I was still young. I really didn't think, well, hey, for the 500 races, maybe we could have built a one-off 300 or 350. And just did it on my own, those 6 rounds. But, I chose to stay with Cowie. And, again, that's kind of where Roy Turner and I mean, he was just more California oriented. And me being from the East, I wasn't one of his favorite people in the sense. I mean, we did not get along, but again, he would have rather had Ronnie there than me. And so I negotiated my way instead of sitting down a year at home, not being able to race.
Right.
I thought, well, give me all my bikes, all my parts, and let me go out and kick your butt,
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, were you involved with Technicell too in Italy? They were a big sponsor of yours?
They were a huge sponsor of mine in Europe, and that was another one that I had started importing. And again, they're great people. One of the best products out there for seat covers and they started the graphics side of it, the all tank setup and all of that. It just, again, that was another difficulty in ordering product, receiving product on time and complete instead of partial. And, it was just a real hard working relationship. And a lot of it was the distance as well.
Well, but while you were there in Italy, they were behind you there.
They were there my whole career.
Yeah.
In Europe.
Yeah. Well, Bill, we are just about out of time for tonight. You mentioned a few people that you used to ride with and some of your sponsors, but is there anything else you'd like to plug? We could talk about that event you have coming up again now, or anything else you might want to talk about. I'll give you the mic for as long as you need.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank a lot of people, actually. Ari Skog, my Finnish mechanic, Dan Costner, Tommy McCullough, a good friend of mine, Kelly Fouts, just for bringing me back into the racing environment. Kawasaki, of course, FX Gear, Bob Spees, who got me into the vintage racing. And actually, I rode at Diamond Don's Classic, and I went to it one year and actually rode a Mako, which I'd never ridden in my life.
Yeah,
just an opportunity. I mean, just great people around me. They've done wondrous things for me that I could never thank them enough for. And just a word out to the motocross community. I mean, they're just one big family, and just proud to be a part of it. Proud to have the friends and the support that I have, even being a 60-year-old man.
Yeah.
But look out, guys. I'm getting back into some shape, going to do some riding and have some fun.
All right. My guest tonight has been Billy the Bullet Liles. Bill, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with me. I want to caution you, don't hang up. Don't hang up your phone, because I'm going to download the show so we have it, okay? You don't have to sit there with the phone. Just don't disconnect it for like 10 minutes, okay?
I got you, brother, and thank you for having me. Again, a shout out to all my boys, and thanks to all the people that have helped me. And thank you for having me.
You are so welcome, Bill. Thanks for coming on, and we'll chat again soon about your upcoming events, okay?
I do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bill Liles, some interesting stories about Europe, his years at Kawasaki, and he says he's coming back. So Billy's going to be putting on the pants and boots again, by the way it sounds. We're going to take one more commercial break, then we'll be back with some announcements and wrapping up the show. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Joe Abadi for Vintage Motocross Q&A. When you're replacing a cylinder or a gasket or doing a top end on your bike, many times it's very, very difficult to get to the nuts that are on the base. And you want to be sure that you torque those evenly whenever you change a top end. Motion Pro has come up with this great tool. It's the torque adapter, okay? You can put any size wrench in there and you can tighten it up. On the back is a 3/8 drive. You can put your torque wrench in there, get the wrench on the nut that's on the base of your cylinder, and make sure everything is torqued evenly. This is a great tool. I have one in the shop. We use it all the time. It comes with instructions as well. Go see your local dealer or get to motionpro.com. And don't forget, go over to Vintage Motocross Q&A to get a 20% discount on all Motion Pro tools. Vintage Motocross Q&A t-shirts and hoodies are still available. Follow the link in the show description. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor for Vintage Motocross Q&A, get a hold of me. I'll get you a sponsorship proposal package. Thank you, Racer X Magazine. You can get Racer X online and on your newsstands now. Some events that are coming up. George Ackerman got a fabulous event coming up at the Moto Barn in Rutherford Glen, Virginia. That's happening on October 28th. I will be there along with Don Kadowski, Gary Bailey, Martina Faltova-Cope, Warren Reed, Steve Wise, and a couple of more surprise guests as well. Scott Burnworth, October 1st, got the Carlsbad reunion at Booze Brothers in Vista, California. There'll be a bike show. There'll be a lot of legendary people there showing up. Roger DeCoster is on the list, Ricky Johnson, and so many more. Get over there on October 1st, Booze Brothers. Thank you, Mike Chamberlain, for being a supporter of Vintage Motocross Q&A. that is different from being a sponsor. It doesn't cost much, and it really helps us get a good show out to you every week, like these wonderful interviews we've been doing. Don't forget, Discovering 6 Days by Keith Geisner. Still a great book. You can get a hold of it. Discovering 6 Days. Well, that about wraps it up for tonight's episode of Vintage Motocross Q&A. I want to thank Bill Liles again, all of our sponsors, and thank you, the viewers at home who tune in. Don't forget to go over to the Vintage Motocross Q&A Facebook page tomorrow. We'll find out who tonight's winner is. We'll give away some stickers, maybe some Discovering 6 Day books. We'll see what we got in our stash. It's Joe Abadi. Thank you for tuning in to Vintage Motocross Q&A. We'll see you next time.